The autumn morning mist hung heavy over Windsor Castle as Catherine, Princess of Wales, stood at the tall windows of their private apartments. Her fingers traced the cold glass while she watched the groundskeepers below preparing the gardens for winter. In just 3 hours, she would accompany William to RAF Bryce Norton, where he would board a military transport bound for a humanitarian mission that would take him away for 6 weeks. This wasn't their first separation since marriage, but something felt different this time. The weight of recent events had settled heavily on both their shoulders. The past year had brought unprecedented challenges to the royal family, and the British public had watched every move, every expression, every gesture with intense scrutiny. Catherine had learned to navigate the constant observation, but lately the pressure felt suffocating. William emerged from their bedroom, already dressed in his military uniform. The sight of him in dress blues always reminded Catherine of their early courtship days, when she would secretly watch him during his military training. Now 13 years into their marriage, that same uniform represented duty calls that would separate them from each other and their 3 children. Their morning routine unfolded in comfortable silence. William reviewed his mission briefings while Catherine prepared tea, a ritual they had maintained since their university days. The familiar domestic scene provided a stark contrast to the formal world that awaited them outside these private walls. These quiet moments together had become precious, stolen time away from the relentless demands of royal duty. The children had already left for school. Their goodbyes to their father deliberately kept light and normal. George, Charlotte, and Louis had grown accustomed to their father's absences, though Catherine knew they felt each departure deeply. She had spent years perfecting the art of maintaining normalcy for their sake, even when her own heart was breaking. As they sat together over breakfast, neither spoke about the mission details. They had learned long ago that some conversations were too heavy for morning light. Instead, they discussed plans for Louis's upcoming birthday party and Charlotte's school play. These ordinary concerns felt like lifelines, anchoring them to the life they had built beyond the public eye. Catherine noticed how William's jaw tightened slightly when he checked his phone for the final weather reports from the deployment zone. She had memorized every subtle sign of his stress over the years. The way his left hand would unconsciously reach for his wedding ring when he was anxious, how his voice would drop just a note lower when he was trying to reassure her while managing his own fears. The clock on the mantelpiece chimed 9, signaling their departure time was approaching. Catherine excused herself to change into the navy coat dress she had selected for the day. As she stood before the mirror adjusting her jewelry, she caught sight of the small silver bracelet William had given her during their engagement. She never wore it to public events, keeping it as a private reminder of their promises to each other. When she returned to the sitting room, William was standing by the fireplace staring at their family portrait from last Christmas. His shoulders carried the weight of a man who had never asked for the life he was born into, but had learned to bear it with dignity. Catherine approached him quietly, placing her hand on his arm. The car arrived precisely at 9:30 as scheduled. Their protection officers waited respectfully outside, while the couple gathered their final belongings. Catherine picked up her handbag, checking once more for the small gifts she had prepared for William to take with him. A photo of the children from their summer holiday, a letter she had written the night before, and his favorite chocolate biscuits wrapped carefully in tissue paper. As they walked toward the front entrance, their footsteps echoed in the grand hallway, lined with portraits of previous generations who had walked these same corridors facing their own separations and challenges. Catherine wondered if any of them had felt this same mixture of pride and dread that accompanied royal duty. The staff they passed offered respectful nods and wishes for a safe journey. These people had become extended family over the years, witnessing their private moments and keeping their secrets. Mrs. Henderson, their longtime housekeeper, pressed a thermos of William's favorite tea into Catherine's hands with a knowing smile. Outside, the November air was crisp and clean. The car doors stood open, waiting. This moment always felt like stepping from their private world into the fishbowl of public life. Once they left the castle grounds, every movement would be observed, analyzed, and reported. The luxury of genuine emotion would have to be carefully controlled. William helped Catherine into the car, his hand lingering on hers for just a moment longer than necessary. As they settled into the back seat, She noticed he was wearing the cufflinks she had given him for their 10th wedding anniversary. These small tokens of their personal life, hidden within the formal requirements of public appearances, had become their secret language of love and support. The drive to RAF Bryce Norton would take 45 minutes through the Oxfordshire countryside. Catherine watched the familiar landscape roll past the windows, each mile bringing them closer to another goodbye. She had learned to treasure these car journeys together, the last private moments before duty claimed them both in different ways. The countryside blurred past their window as Catherine watched William review his mission documents one final time. His brow was furrowed in concentration, but she could see the tension in his posture. This deployment wasn't just another royal engagement or ceremonial duty. He would be working directly with humanitarian organizations in a region still recovering from natural disasters, where real lives hung in the balance. Their driver, James, had been with them for 7 years and understood the unspoken rules of these journeys. No radio, minimal conversation, and complete discretion about anything he might overhear. Catherine appreciated his sensitivity during these difficult transitions from private couple to public figures performing their duties. William closed the briefing folder and reached for Catherine's hand. His fingers were cold despite the car's warmth, and she could feel the slight tremor that always appeared before significant departures. They had developed their own silent communication over the years, and she squeezed his hand 3 times, their private code for "I love you." The landscape outside was painted in autumn colors, golden fields stretching toward distant hills dotted with sheep. Catherine tried to memorize every detail, knowing she would need these peaceful images during the long weeks ahead. She would return to this drive alone, retracing their path while William flew thousands of miles away. Their conversation remained light, touching on practical matters like the children's schedules and upcoming engagements Catherine would handle solo. Neither wanted to venture into the emotional territory of their separation. They had learned that some feelings were too large for words, better expressed through touch and presence while they still had time together. William's phone buzzed with a message from his private secretary confirming final arrangements. The military precision of royal logistics always amazed Catherine, how every minute was planned and contingencies prepared for situations she preferred not to imagine. Behind every public appearance lay hours of security briefings and risk assessments that reminded her constantly of the dangers inherent in their position. As they approached the final stretch of their journey, Catherine noticed William's breathing had changed, becoming deeper and more controlled. She recognized his mental preparation routine, the way he shifted from husband and father into the focused mindset required for his mission. This transformation was necessary but always felt like watching him disappear piece by piece. The first glimpse of RAF Bryce Norton appeared through the trees, its control tower and hangars rising from the flat Oxfordshire landscape. Catherine's stomach tightened as the reality of their impending separation became concrete. No matter how many times they had done this, the moment never became easier. Security barriers and military personnel marked their transition into official protocol. Their car was waved through checkpoints where armed guards stood at attention. Catherine straightened her shoulders and checked her appearance in the compact mirror, preparing for the public role she would need to perform flawlessly despite her personal feelings. The aircraft that would carry William away sat on the tarmac like a sleeping giant, its RAF markings stark against the gray metal. Ground crews moved efficiently around it, loading supplies and conducting final checks. Catherine tried not to think about all the ocean and land that machine would cross with her husband inside. William's aide-de-camp, Colonel Morrison, approached their car as it came to a stop in the designated area. He had served with William for 4 years and understood the delicate balance between military efficiency and personal consideration. His respectful nod to Catherine acknowledged both her position and the difficulty of the moment. The media presence was deliberately limited for this departure, with only the official royal photographer and one approved journalist present. Catherine was grateful for the relative privacy, though she knew every image taken would be analyzed by millions of people seeking insight into their relationship and her emotional state. As they stepped from the car, the November wind caught Catherine's coat, and William instinctively moved closer to shield her. These automatic gestures of care and protection had become second nature over their years together. Small acts of love performed without conscious thought even in the most formal circumstances. The base commander, Group Captain Williams, greeted them with military courtesy but genuine warmth. She had met him several times during previous visits and appreciated his understanding of the personal cost behind public duty. His wife had been a military spouse for 20 years, and Catherine often found comfort in talking with others who understood the unique challenges of their lifestyle. Other personnel involved in the mission stood nearby, waiting for their formal introduction to the prince. Catherine recognized the mix of excitement and nervousness that appeared whenever people met William for the first time. Despite 13 years of marriage, she still felt proud watching him interact with others, seeing how naturally he put people at ease while maintaining the dignity his position required. The wind across the airfield was stronger than expected, and Catherine wished she had brought gloves. William noticed her discomfort and stepped slightly closer, using his body to block the worst of the gusts. These small acts of consideration had sustained their relationship through years of public scrutiny and private challenges. Final preparations were moving quickly now, with ground crews completing their checklists and other passengers beginning to board. Catherine could see William's focus shifting as duty called him away from their private bubble. She had learned to recognize this transition and respect its necessity, even when it felt like losing him before he had actually left. The formal briefing took place in the base operations center, where wall-mounted screens displayed weather patterns and flight paths across multiple time zones. Catherine listened as military officials outlined the mission parameters, though much of the technical language washed over her. What mattered was the underlying message. This was a complex operation with inherent risks that couldn't be completely eliminated. William asked detailed questions about local conditions and coordination with international relief organizations. Catherine watched him absorb information with the focused intensity that had first attracted her during their university days. His ability to quickly grasp complex situations and identify key issues had served him well in both military service and royal duties. The mission photographer captured moments of the briefing for official records, but Catherine knew these formal images would never convey the emotional undercurrent of the day. The real story existed in the spaces between protocol, in glances exchanged and hands briefly touched when no one was watching. After the briefing, they had 30 minutes for private goodbyes before final boarding procedures began. Group Captain Williams offered them the use of his office, a gesture of consideration that Catherine deeply appreciated. The small room with its military-issue furniture and maps covering the walls provided blessed privacy from observing eyes. William removed his formal cap and ran his fingers through his hair, a gesture Catherine had seen thousands of times but which still made her heart skip. Away from the cameras and officials, his carefully maintained composure relaxed slightly, revealing the man she had fallen in love with rather than the prince the world expected to see. They sat together on the small sofa, finally able to speak freely about their fears and hopes for the coming weeks. William talked about his desire to make a meaningful contribution to the relief efforts, while Catherine shared her concerns about managing their public commitments and supporting the children through another separation. The conversation they had avoided all morning finally surfaced. Gentle but honest acknowledgement of how difficult these partings had become. The early years of their marriage had been easier in some ways, when royal duties were lighter and public expectations less intense. Now every separation carried the weight of increased responsibility and scrutiny. Catherine gave William the small package she had prepared, watching his face soften as he recognized her careful wrapping style. Inside, he found the family photo, her letter, and the chocolate biscuits that had become tradition for his travels. He tucked the items carefully into his flight bag, handling them like precious artifacts. In return, William presented Catherine with a small jewelry box containing a delicate silver charm bracelet. Each charm represented a significant moment in their relationship, from their engagement to the birth of each child. He fastened it around her wrist, his fingers gentle against her skin as he secured the clasp. Their physical connection had always been a source of strength, but public protocol severely limited displays of affection. These private moments of touch became precious, storing up comfort for the weeks of separation ahead. Catherine memorized the warmth of his hands and the familiar scent of his cologne. A gentle knock on the door signaled their time was ending. Colonel Morrison's voice carried the regret of a man who understood the personal cost of duty, but couldn't alter its demands. William and Catherine took a final moment to look at each other, storing up memories to sustain them through the coming separation. They emerged from the office to find the departure area bustling with final preparations. Other mission personnel were gathering their equipment and saying their own goodbyes to family members who had come to see them off. Catherine felt a kinship with these other wives and partners facing similar separations. The walk to the aircraft felt both endless and far too short. Each step brought them closer to the moment Catherine dreaded while also delaying the inevitable goodbye. She focused on maintaining her composure, knowing that photographs of this moment would be scrutinized by media and public alike. William's military training showed in his bearing as they approached the aircraft. His stride became more purposeful, his shoulders squaring as he transitioned fully into his operational role. Catherine admired his ability to compartmentalize his emotions while knowing the personal cost of such control. The aircraft's engines were already running, filling the air with a low rumble that made conversation difficult. Ground crews moved efficiently around them, following procedures refined through years of military operations. Catherine tried not to think about all the similar scenes that had played out on the same tarmac. Other passengers were already aboard, their faces visible through the small windows. Some were military personnel, others were aid workers and officials joining the humanitarian mission. Catherine felt grateful that William would be traveling with experienced professionals who understood both the mission requirements and the unique pressures he faced as a royal family member. The media photographer captured images of their final approach to the aircraft, but Catherine was grateful for the restricted access that prevented intrusive coverage of their goodbye. She had learned to navigate the balance between public interest and private grief, giving enough access to satisfy legitimate curiosity while protecting the most intimate moments. William stopped at the base of the aircraft steps and turned to face Catherine one final time before boarding. The wind whipped across the tarmac, tugging at her coat and threatening to disturb her carefully arranged hair. But she barely noticed the physical discomfort as she focused entirely on these last precious seconds together. Standing at the bottom of the aircraft steps, Catherine felt the full weight of the moment settling around them like a heavy cloak. The noise of the engines made quiet conversation impossible, but their eyes spoke volumes that words could never capture. 13 years of marriage had given them a language beyond speech, and now that silent communication carried all their love, worry, and hope. William reached for her hands, a gesture that would normally be carefully choreographed for public appearances. But something in his expression told Catherine this was different. His touch was firm and desperate, fingers intertwining with hers as if he could somehow transfer his strength directly to her through their connection. The wind continued to whip across the tarmac, and Catherine felt her carefully styled hair coming loose from its pins. Normally, she would have been concerned about her appearance in front of the cameras, but William's gaze never left her face. In that moment, she realized he was seeing only her, not the princess the world expected, but the woman he had chosen to love. Without warning, William pulled her closer, eliminating the careful distance they usually maintained in public. His hands moved to frame her face, thumbs gently brushing across her cheekbones in a gesture so tender and intimate that Catherine felt her breath catch. The world around them seemed to fade, the aircraft engines becoming distant background noise. What happened next would be replayed millions of times in the days to come, analyzed by body language experts and relationship commentators around the globe. William leaned down and kissed Catherine with an intensity that spoke of 6 weeks of separation stretching ahead. It wasn't the brief, formal kiss usually exchanged at public events, but something deeper and more desperate. Catherine responded without thinking about the cameras or the watching personnel. Her hands moved to his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath the military uniform. For those few seconds, they were simply a husband and wife facing separation, their love too powerful to be contained by royal protocol. When they finally separated, Catherine saw tears threatening in William's eyes, a sight she had witnessed only a handful of times during their marriage. The man who carried the weight of future kingship on his shoulders was letting her see his vulnerability, trusting her with his fears in the most public of settings. The kiss lasted perhaps 15 seconds, but its impact rippled outward like stones thrown into still water. The official photographer continued capturing images, understanding instinctively that he was witnessing something historically significant. Military personnel stood at respectful attention, their eyes diplomatically averted but their emotional awareness palpable. Catherine felt her own composure beginning to crack as the reality of their goodbye settled around them. 6 weeks stretched ahead like an endless corridor, filled with solo engagements, single parenting, and the constant worry that came with loving someone whose duty regularly placed him in harm's way. William seemed to sense her emotional state and pulled her into a tight embrace, his arms wrapping around her with protective intensity. Catherine buried her face against his shoulder, breathing in his familiar scent and trying to memorize the feeling of safety his presence always provided. Their embrace lasted longer than any public display of affection they had ever shared. Royal protocol suggested brief, controlled contact appropriate for their positions, but something fundamental had shifted in this moment. They were claiming their right to genuine emotion, regardless of who might be watching or judging. When they finally stepped apart, Catherine saw that William's military composure had returned, but his eyes still held a soft warmth reserved only for her. He straightened his uniform jacket with practiced efficiency, while she smoothed her wind-tossed hair, both transitioning back to their public roles while carrying the memory of their private moment. Colonel Morrison approached discreetly, indicating that final boarding procedures needed to begin. His respectful manner suggested he understood the significance of what he had witnessed and would guard their privacy as much as possible within his official duties. William turned to shake hands with the base commander and other officials, performing the ceremonial courtesies required before departure. But Catherine noticed how his movements had changed, becoming more purposeful and determined. Their goodbye had somehow strengthened his resolve rather than weakening it. The media photographer continued working, but Catherine sensed a different quality to his images now. Where earlier shots had captured formal protocol, these final frames would contain genuine emotion that transcended royal expectations. She wondered what the public would make of seeing their future king and queen as simply two people in love. Other mission personnel were completing their final boarding, and Catherine could see through the aircraft windows that passengers were taking their seats. The machinery of departure was moving inexorably forward, carrying William away from her and toward responsibilities she could only imagine. As William prepared to climb the aircraft steps, he paused and removed something from his jacket pocket. Catherine recognized the small compass she had given him during their engagement, a private joke about always finding his way back to her. He held it up briefly, a gesture meant only for her eyes before tucking it safely away. The simple action spoke more powerfully than any declaration of love. In choosing to carry her gift on this mission, William was promising to remember their connection across whatever distance and danger lay ahead. Catherine touched the charm bracelet he had just given her, completing their circle of protective talismans. Ground crews were making final checks, and the aircraft's engines had increased their tempo in preparation for departure. The sounds of imminent separation filled the air, mechanical and urgent. Catherine straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin, drawing on reserves of strength she hadn't known she possessed. As William began climbing the aircraft steps, Catherine watched each movement with the intensity of someone memorizing a precious moment. His military bearing was evident in every step, but she could see the slight hesitation before he reached the aircraft door. At the threshold, he turned back one final time, his hand raised in a wave that managed to be both regal and heartbreakingly personal. The gesture triggered something unexpected in Catherine. Instead of her usual composed wave, she pressed her hand to her lips and then extended it toward him, blowing a kiss with such natural spontaneity that it caught everyone off guard. The action was completely contrary to royal protocol, but it felt like the most honest expression of her love she had ever made in public. William's face transformed at the sight of her blown kiss. The careful control he maintained as a prince melted away, replaced by a smile of such genuine joy and love that it seemed to illuminate the gray November morning. He caught her kiss with his free hand, pressing it to his heart in a gesture that made Catherine's eyes fill with tears. The aircraft door closed with mechanical finality, cutting off their visual connection, but not the emotional bond that stretched between them. Catherine remained standing on the tarmac as the engines increased their power and ground crews began removing the wheel chocks. The reality of separation was settling over her like cold fog. Group Captain Williams approached quietly, offering to escort her to the observation area where she could watch the takeoff in more comfort. Catherine accepted gratefully, knowing that remaining strong for these final moments was important not just for her own dignity, but for the message it would send to military families everywhere who faced similar goodbyes. From the observation deck, Catherine had a clear view of the runway where Williams' aircraft was beginning to taxi into position. The massive machine moved with surprising grace, its RAF markings clearly visible in the morning light. She thought about all the families who had stood in similar positions, watching their loved ones depart for missions around the world. The aircraft paused at the end of the runway as pilots completed their final checks and received clearance from air traffic control. Catherine found herself holding her breath, as if her stillness could somehow ensure the safety of everyone aboard. The wait felt endless, suspended time that stretched her nerves to breaking point. When the engines roared to full power, Catherine felt the sound vibrate through her body. The aircraft began its takeoff roll, gathering speed with determined purpose. She watched it lift gracefully into the gray sky, climbing steadily until it became a small speck against the clouds before disappearing entirely. The silence that followed felt overwhelming. After hours of preparation and the crescendo of departure, the sudden quiet left Catherine feeling hollow and displaced. Group Captain Williams offered quiet condolences on the separation, his words carrying the understanding of someone who had witnessed many such partings. The drive back to Windsor passed in contemplative silence. Catherine watched the same countryside they had traveled together just hours earlier, but everything looked different now. The golden fields seemed duller, the autumn colors muted by her altered emotional state. The landscape that had promised comfort during their morning journey now emphasized her solitude. James, their driver, maintained his professional discretion while somehow conveying his sympathy through small gestures. He kept the car slightly warmer than usual, and chose routes that avoided the heaviest traffic, allowing Catherine time to process her emotions without external pressure. His consideration reminded her of the many people who supported their family behind the scenes. Back at Windsor Castle, Catherine faced the challenge of transitioning from wife missing her husband to princess managing a full schedule of commitments. Her private secretary, Rebecca, met her with updates on the afternoon's engagements and changes required to accommodate William's absence. The efficiency of royal logistics continued regardless of personal feelings. The children would be returning from school soon, and Catherine knew they would need reassurance about their father's departure. George, at 10, was old enough to understand the gravity of humanitarian missions, while 7-year-old Charlotte often expressed her emotions through behavior rather than words. 5-year-old Louis simply knew his father was gone and wouldn't return for many weeks. Catherine took a few precious minutes alone in their private sitting room, finally allowing herself to feel the full impact of William's departure. The room still held traces of his presence. His coffee cup from breakfast, the morning newspapers folded as he preferred them, his reading glasses left on the side table. These domestic artifacts felt both comforting and painful. The first news reports were already appearing online, with photographs of their goodbye being analyzed by royal correspondents around the world. Catherine avoided reading the commentary, knowing that public interpretation of their private moment would never capture its true meaning. The blown kiss that had felt so natural in the moment was already being described as unprecedented. Social media was responding with overwhelming positivity to the images of their farewell. Comments poured in from people who recognized the genuine love displayed despite royal constraints. Many shared their own experiences of military separations, creating an unexpected connection between the royal family and ordinary families facing similar challenges. Catherine's phone buzzed with a message from William, sent from the aircraft before takeoff. "Thank you for the perfect goodbye. Carrying your love with me always." The simple words provided comfort while also emphasizing the distance that now separated them. Technology could bridge the gap partially, but nothing could replace his physical presence. The afternoon brought a children's hospital visit that Catherine would now handle alone. She reviewed her briefing notes while her dresser helped select appropriate attire for the engagement. The work of being royal continued regardless of personal circumstances, demanding the same level of commitment and attention to detail. As Catherine prepared to leave for her afternoon engagement, she caught sight of herself in the hallway mirror. Her reflection showed a woman who had just said goodbye to her husband, but who was ready to fulfill her duties with dignity and grace. The blown kiss had revealed her humanity, but now she must demonstrate her strength. The children's hospital visit took on deeper meaning as Catherine walked through wards filled with families, facing their own separations and uncertainties. Young patients smiled bravely despite their circumstances, reminding her that courage comes in many forms. Their resilience put her own challenges into perspective and strengthened her resolve to honor their trust through dedicated service. During her conversations with hospital staff, Catherine found herself speaking more personally about the importance of family support during difficult times. The morning's emotional goodbye had stripped away some of her usual reserve, allowing more authentic connections with the people she met. Nurses and doctors responded to her increased openness with their own honest insights about their work. The visit concluded with Catherine reading stories to children in the hospital's family room. As she shared tales of adventure and homecoming, she thought about her own children who would soon need comfort about their father's absence. The universal themes of love, separation, and reunion resonated through every story, creating bridges between royal experience and human experience. Returning to Windsor in the late afternoon, Catherine found George, Charlotte, and Louis waiting in the family room with their nanny, Maria. Their faces showed the careful composure they had learned to maintain, but Catherine could read the worry beneath their controlled expressions. Louis ran to her immediately, seeking the physical comfort he needed but couldn't articulate. The family dinner that evening felt different without William's presence at the head of the table. Catherine took his usual seat, maintaining family routines while acknowledging the change in their household dynamic. The children shared details from their school day with extra enthusiasm, as if trying to fill the quiet spaces their father would normally occupy. George asked thoughtful questions about the humanitarian mission, his young mind already grasping the complexity of royal duty and personal sacrifice. Charlotte remained quieter than usual, processing her emotions in her own way while staying close to Catherine throughout the evening. Louis simply announced that he missed Papa and asked when he would come home. Bedtime routines required extra patience and attention as each child worked through their feelings about their father's departure. Catherine read additional stories, answered repeated questions about the mission timeline, and provided extra hugs and reassurance. These intimate moments of parenting reminded her why their family had chosen to prioritize normalcy whenever possible. After the children were settled, Catherine finally had time to review the day's news coverage. The photographs of their goodbye had indeed captured international attention, with media outlets praising the authentic emotion displayed by the royal couple. Editorial writers noted how the images humanized the monarchy while respecting the dignity of their positions. Public reaction had been overwhelmingly positive, with social media filled with supportive messages from people who recognized genuine love when they saw it. Military families particularly appreciated seeing their own experiences reflected in royal life. The blown kiss had resonated as a symbol of love transcending protocol and duty. Palace communications staff reported requests for interviews and features about royal marriages and military service. The genuine emotion of the morning had created opportunities for meaningful dialogue about the personal costs of public service. Catherine agreed to consider carefully selected engagements that might support military families facing similar separations. Her evening phone call with William provided much-needed connection despite the thousands of miles between them. His voice carried exhaustion from the long flight, but also excitement about beginning the mission work. He had already met with local officials and humanitarian coordinators, throwing himself into the complex logistics of disaster relief efforts. William described the devastation he had witnessed during his initial briefings, emphasizing how crucial international support would be for the recovery efforts. His passion for the work was evident even through the poor satellite connection, reminding Catherine why these separations were necessary. Despite their personal cost, they talked about the children's reactions to his departure and planned strategies for maintaining family connection. Throughout the 6-week mission, video calls would be challenging due to time zones and security restrictions, but they committed to finding creative ways to bridge the distance and include William in daily family life. The conversation inevitably turned to the morning's emotional goodbye and its unexpected public reception. William expressed amazement at the positive response to their authentic moment, noting how refreshing it felt to simply be themselves rather than performing calculated royal gestures. The blown kiss had become a symbol of love's ability to transcend formal constraints. As Catherine prepared for bed in their empty room, she felt the full weight of the weeks ahead settling around her. Solo parenting, increased royal duties, and constant worry about William's safety would test her strength in ways she couldn't fully anticipate. But the memory of their goodbye provided a foundation of love to build upon. The charm bracelet William had given her caught the lamplight as she removed her jewelry, each small symbol representing moments of joy and commitment they had shared. She would wear it throughout his absence as a reminder of their connection and a promise of his return. Catherine's final act before sleep was to write in the private journal she had maintained throughout their marriage. Tonight's entry captured the complexity of loving someone whose duty regularly demanded separation and sacrifice. She wrote about the blown kiss, the children's bravery, and her own determination to honor the trust placed in her as both princess and mother. The morning would bring new challenges and responsibilities, but Catherine felt prepared to face them with the strength drawn from genuine love and authentic connection. The goodbye that had stirred Britain had also revealed the foundation that would sustain their family through the weeks of separation ahead. 6 weeks later, the same tarmac at RAF Bryce Norton witnessed a reunion that would complete the story begun with their emotional farewell. Catherine stood in almost the identical spot where she had blown that famous kiss. But everything felt different now. The November chill had given way to January's sharper cold, and she carried with her the accumulated strength of weeks spent proving she could manage alone, while never forgetting she was part of a partnership. The children stood beside her this time, their excited chatter filling the air as they spotted their father's aircraft approaching through the gray winter sky. George pointed out technical details about the landing procedure while Charlotte clutched a homemade welcome sign and Louis bounced on his toes with barely contained enthusiasm. William's mission had been challenging but successful, contributing to relief efforts that had helped thousands of families rebuild their lives after devastating floods. His daily reports had kept Catherine informed about his work, but nothing could convey the physical and emotional toll of witnessing such widespread suffering while working in difficult conditions. The aircraft touched down smoothly and taxied toward the reception area where the family waited. Catherine felt her heart rate increase as the moment of reunion approached. 6 weeks of separation about to end in a few precious minutes. The children pressed closer to her, their excitement building as ground crews moved to position the mobile stairs. When the aircraft door opened and William appeared at the top of the steps, Catherine felt tears spring to her eyes despite her determination to remain composed. He looked thinner and more weathered than when he had left, but his smile upon seeing his family was radiant with joy and relief. William descended the steps with measured pace, acknowledging the official reception party with appropriate dignity, while his eyes never left his family. The formal greeting protocol seemed endless to Catherine, who wanted nothing more than to run to him and confirm his safe return through touch and embrace. When official duties were finally complete, William walked directly to his family with growing speed until he was nearly running. Louis reached him first, launching himself into his father's arms with complete trust that he would be caught and held securely. Charlotte and George followed, creating a family huddle that excluded the rest of the world. Catherine hung back slightly, allowing the children their moment with their father, while memorizing the scene of their reunion. William's face above their heads showed exhaustion mixed with overwhelming relief and love. 6 weeks of separation had ended, but the memory of their goodbye had sustained them all through the challenging period. When William finally looked up and met Catherine's eyes across the few feet that still separated them, the communication was instant and complete. No words were needed to convey what they had both endured and learned during their time apart. The blown kiss that had captured the world's attention had been justified by this moment of joyful return. William approached Catherine more slowly, the children still clinging to him but stepping aside to allow their parents their own reunion. The kiss they shared was gentler than their passionate goodbye but carried equal emotional weight. This was not desperate farewell but grateful homecoming, seasoned with the knowledge that they had both grown stronger during their separation. The family's private car waited nearby, offering escape from public observation and return to their personal world. As they settled together for the journey home, Catherine felt the completeness that had been missing for 6 weeks. William's physical presence filled the space in ways that video calls and messages never could. The children dominated the conversation during the drive, sharing everything they had saved up to tell their father. School achievements, friendship dramas, and daily discoveries poured out in an excited jumble that made William laugh with genuine delight. Catherine watched him absorb their stories with complete attention, storing up these moments after weeks of missing their daily lives. Back at Windsor Castle, the reunion continued in their private apartments where William could finally shed his formal role and simply be husband and father. Catherine noticed how he moved through familiar rooms, touching objects and settling into favorite chairs as if confirming the reality of his return. The evening unfolded with deliberate normalcy as they re-established family routines disrupted by separation. William helped with homework, listened to bedtime stories, and tucked each child into bed with extra attention and affection. Catherine watched from doorways, letting them reconnect while savoring the return of completeness to their household. Their own private reunion happened later. When the children were asleep and they finally had uninterrupted time together, William shared stories from his mission that had been too complex or sensitive for their brief phone calls, while Catherine described the challenges and successes of managing their responsibilities alone. They talked until very late, rebuilding their connection through the sharing of experiences and emotions that had accumulated during separation. The blown kiss that had marked their goodbye had become symbolic of their ability to remain authentic within the constraints of royal life, and their reunion confirmed the strength of what they had built together. The next morning brought return to normal schedules and shared responsibilities, but something fundamental had shifted in their relationship. The goodbye that had stirred Britain by revealing genuine emotion in the midst of formal duty had proven that authentic love could coexist with royal obligation without diminishing either. Catherine kept the charm bracelet William had given her before departure, adding it to her collection of meaningful jewelry that marked significant moments in their marriage. The blown kiss would be remembered by the public as a moment of royal humanity, but for Catherine it remained simply the natural expression of love, too powerful to be contained by protocol. Their story continued beyond that famous farewell and joyful reunion, strengthened by the knowledge that they could face separation and difficulty while maintaining the connection that anchored their lives. The goodbye that had captured the world's attention had ultimately been about love's ability to transcend distance, duty, and the expectations of others, revealing the enduring power of authentic human connection.